Before we begin, I hope you enjoy what you're about to hear. If you do, please leave a like, drop a comment, and subscribe for future stories. It's a small action on your end, but it really supports my work.
The low morning air always carried the scent of wet pine needles and, when the wind shifted correctly, the faint, earthy tang of wood smoke from 7 miles away, where the highways curled around the foothills. For Aaron Walker, this specific blend of cold moisture and distant human industry was not just weather. It was the tuning fork for the pack. It set the daily rhythm, establishing the quiet certainty of where boundaries lay and what survival demanded. But lately, the tuning fork had gone flat, replaced by a low, persistent hum of expectation, thick and unhealthy as marsh fog hanging low over the lowlands. Aaron, accustomed to reading the minute shifts in muscle tension and the barely perceptible fluctuations in the pheromonal output of his subordinates, tasted something unsaid, something clotting in the back of his throat whenever he breathed deeply. He sat on the rise overlooking the primary clearing, the ground still stiff with pre-dawn frost that had not yet been burned off by the sickly yellow sun climbing over the eastern ridge. He assigned the patrol routes for the day, the quiet, necessary work of maintaining the veil. When he finished, he found the gaze of the inner circle. The old, reliable beasts he had trusted for years was too slow in breaking contact. They were not looking at the Alpha who had just delivered the command. They were looking through him, appraising the density and weight of his shadow, measuring its reach against their own growing ambition. There was no defiance, not yet, only a calculated, heavy silence, weighted with a latent threat that absorbed all sound. It was not the silence of respect. It was the silence of consideration. Aaron noted the first physical breach a few hours later, near the old logging road where maximum concealment was mandatory. He followed the patrol line, expecting the usual careful placement of paws, ensuring the damp earth sprang back just enough to obscure the shape and direction of travel. Instead, he found deep, deliberately scuffed prints, loose soil pushed up in mounds. It was sloppy, inexcusable work, yet executed with a perverse kind of precision. This was no simple lapse in judgment. This was the signature of a declaration. Aaron knelt, sinking his hand into the cold, saturated dirt. The chill immediately permeated his skin, settling painfully beneath his fingernails. The smell of rich, black soil mixed with something sharper, something metallic and utterly familiar. The acrid, burning scent of calculated provocation. It felt like being intentionally brushed by a rattlesnake in the dark. A warning, not an attack. He spent the afternoon planning an emergency meeting, knowing the timing was poor but understanding that delay meant tacit acceptance of the breach. They gathered under a canopy of thick, ancient hemlocks, the ground beneath their feet muffled by centuries of accumulated needles. The air was heavy, still, and tasted of coming cold. Aaron spoke about the necessity of increased operational security. He cited the recent, unnerving spike in human presence along the peripheral zones. New construction vehicles, drone surveys, the usual signs that the world was creeping closer. He used facts, figures, and the cold pragmatism of survival that had kept them safe for generations. He detailed the historical reasons why absolute cleanliness of action was their only firewall against elimination. He ended, waiting for the flurry of questions, the minor disagreements, the necessary discourse of a functioning command. The response was a crushing, hollow silence. Not one single beast offered a question or a confirmation or even a challenge. There was only a collective, heavy exhalation, a shared breath that hit Aaron's chest like a slab of cold, gray quarry rock. It was passive resistance rendered physical, an impenetrable wall of refusal that offered no purchase for the alpha to climb. He realized then that they were not just disagreeing with him. They were dismissing the reality he presented. They had already rewritten the rules. Later that night, the moon ascended, hanging impossibly high and bright above the dense forest canopy. It was a cold, alien light that stripped the woods of color, rendering everything in stark silver and deep, threatening shadow. Aaron lay on his bed of dried leaves and pine straw, unable to fall into anything deeper than a tortured doze. He felt the insistent rhythm of his own heart, a drumbeat that sounded too loud, too desperate in the unnerving quiet. Just beyond the perimeter of his temporary refuge, the wind rustled through the dying summer leaves. And in that rustle, Aaron recognized it. The subtle, unmistakable carrying of foreign, hostile intent. He had always been the one who read the pack, interpreting their needs, their fears, their subtle shifts in mood. Now, lying there, bathed in that sterile moonlight, he understood with absolute chilling clarity. The pack was reading him. They were studying the flaw, the fissure, waiting for the perfect moment to exploit the weakness inherent in the position of leadership. His greatest fear was not physical confrontation. It was the loss of that necessary vital connection, the deep current of loyalty that made them one entity. Now, that current was dead, and he was drifting alone. The air grew colder, and the dread started to feel less like an emotion and more like physical pressure against his sternum. He closed his eyes, listening for a sound that was not his own panicked breathing, knowing he would not find it. The transgression occurred 7 miles due east of the nearest sleeping burrow, under the rusted skeleton of an old railway spur. The rule governing this zone was sacred. Absolutely no trace of aggressive action near human civilization. No messy remnants, no lingering odors that could be caught by a passing breeze, or worse, by the keen noses of trained hunting dogs. The penalty for violation was severe, instant, and universally understood. Aaron arrived at the spur just as the sun broke, a pale, anemic disk struggling to burn through the morning fog. The air felt unnaturally heavy, soaked not just with dew and mist, but with the thick metallic odor of fresh venous blood. What he found was not merely the sloppy mistake of a hungry predator. It was an exhibition, an act of calculated vandalism against their own security. The brutality was excessive and careless. Fragments were scattered widely, intentionally maximizing the sensory footprint, drawing attention to the act itself. The victim, a large deer, far too big to justify the overkill, had been left deliberately exposed. Layered over the rich, drying crimson, which was already darkening to a viscous black, was a sharper, pungent, and deeply offensive tang. It was the combined scent of adrenaline, aggression, and something chemical, something almost human in its cold lack of necessity. Despite the dampness and the dissipating morning fog, the smell did not disperse. It clung, like oil to the surface of water. Aaron dropped into a full crouch, examining the ground. The trail leading away from the carnage was unmistakable, designed to be followed. The steps were wide, lazy, and utterly unconcerned with ground cover. They tore up the sensitive layer of moss and light soil, leading directly back toward the main den site in the higher woods. This was language, utterly clear to any creature that walked on 4 feet. We no longer fear the consequences. The trail was not a mistake. It was an open letter, stamped with threat and sealed with fresh blood. He did not bother to clean the scene. Cleaning implied he still cared about upholding rules the pack had already chosen to disregard. He followed the brazen track back, the tension in his shoulders drawing tighter with every visible tear in the earth. When he arrived back at the temporary camp, the beasts were restless, a coil of nervous energy, yet they maintained a facade of routine. The second in command, a massive, scarred brute who had been with Aaron since they were pups, sat near the perimeter, pretending to inspect a piece of scavenged bone. Aaron approached him directly, demanding an explanation for the obscene scene at the rail spur. He did not ask if it was an inner circle action. He only needed to know why it had been allowed. Aaron expected the usual deflection, the complex tapestry of lies and excuses that subordinates sometimes weave to preserve face. But what he received was far more unsettling: absolute vacancy. The second's eyes were flat, dull, like pond water that had been stagnant too long. "It was hunger," the beast murmured, the voice low, devoid of inflection. There was no shame, no flicker of guilt, just a statement of fact that carried the weight of absolute truth in his mind. But Aaron knew better. Hunger, true, desperate hunger, had a specific scent, a frantic, focused energy. This reeked of something far colder, something calculated and utterly disconnected from need. This was power used purely for demonstration. With that quiet, vacant statement, the full, invisible schism occurred. When Aaron attempted to issue orders for a necessary redistribution of patrols, a move to reinforce the distant North Quadrant, they did not overtly rebel. They merely moved slowly, delayed, found reasons to pause, waiting with infuriating patience until Aaron would finally turn away, his attention drawn elsewhere by the logistics of moving a dozen large creatures. The worst part was the food. He was still nominally the alpha, and the best kills should, by ancient custom, be offered to him first, a gesture of respect and deference. Now he found himself eating separate, smaller rations, always the tougher, less desirable pieces. The meat was dry and flavorless, lacking the collective, life-affirming heat of the communal feast. He was the head of the table, but he dined alone, an honored statue slowly being covered in dust, revered in title but completely stripped of practical authority. The isolation was not just political, it was physical, deeply chilling. He felt their collective awareness wrapping around him, studying his movements, his fatigue, his frustration. The atmosphere had changed from the brisk cold of the dawn to the sticky, airless heat just before a massive thunderstorm. He waited for the first crack of lightning, knowing it would be aimed directly at him. He moved through the camp with the hyper-vigilance of a trespasser, no longer a ruler. His world had contracted to the 3 feet immediately surrounding his body, and within that small space the air was suddenly very thin. The knowledge was a heavy, cold anchor in his gut. The fight was not coming. The war had already begun. The tension in the camp became a tangible thing, humming like high-voltage lines stretched taut just overhead. It was the kind of atmospheric pressure that preceded a severe electrical storm, making the hair on the back of Aaron's neck stand perpetually on end. The pack had refined its tactic. moving beyond careless tracks and vacant stares into a sophisticated, quiet campaign of physical and psychological isolation. During transitions, the short, necessary movements between the day rest site and the hunting grounds, Aaron was always encircled. The younger wolves were placed too close, yet the inner circle maintained a measured, infuriating distance. He found himself moving in the very center of a crowd, yet completely excluded from the peripheral visual contact, unable to read the hand signals or the subtle body language exchanged between the others. He felt trapped, constantly under observation, yet unable to pinpoint a single aggressive focus. Every time he pivoted to address a subordinate, they were already looking away, busy with some small, immediate task. The simple luxury of deep sleep was the first casualty. Every time Aaron drifted into the necessary restorative phase of rest, someone on the perimeter made a sudden, jarring noise. It was never a cry of true alarm, never an outright attack. It was always subtle, the calculated scrape of a claw across a resonant piece of shale, a low, guttural choke that mimicked a suppressed warning bark, the loud snapping of a dry branch under an unnecessarily heavy footfall. It was deprivation by interruption, a precise chipping away at his fundamental needs. He measured his sleep in jagged 15-minute increments. The exhaustion was a heavy, wet blanket draped over his thoughts, and he felt his rationality slowly fraying at the edges. They were driving him into the deep, dark well of uncontrollable rage, knowing that in his anger he would become sloppy, unstable, and visibly dangerous, the perfect excuse for their final devastating move. Aaron's internal life had contracted severely, focused entirely on threat assessment and counter-strategy. He no longer spent time considering how to regain control of the pack. He focused solely on how to survive against the pack. He knew they wanted him to break, to unleash the unrefined, bestial fury that lay dormant beneath his disciplined exterior. Then, they could unanimously declare him mad, unfit, and eliminate him as a danger to the collective. He watched the young males throughout the days, their sleek bodies restless with undirected energy. He saw new patterns in their training. They were practicing techniques Aaron had strictly forbidden. Brutal, lunging head-on attacks, low sweeps aimed at tearing the Achilles tendons, moves designed not to subdue, but to cripple instantly. Their sparring sessions were sharp, violent, and utterly devoid of the traditional control mechanisms. The teaching cadre was obvious, his own veteran warriors, standing just outside the ring of dirt and flying spittle, offering curt, approving nods. They were preparing for war, and the curriculum was explicitly anti-Aaron. As evening descended, bringing with it the familiar bone-deep cold, Aaron decided on a final direct confrontation. He approached a group gathered around a dwindling, smoky fire. The air was thick with the smell of char and wet, smoldering hardwood. He stood over them, his own massive shadow dominating the small circle of warmth, and spoke calmly, deliberately, about discipline and the long-term threat of human encroachment. He spoke about the rail spur incident, emphasizing the existential risk they had courted. He did not accuse any individual. He addressed the breach of doctrine. He finished his statement and waited, his gaze sweeping across their faces. He saw the flicker of annoyance, the boredom, the shared arrogance. The response was not words or even a direct challenge. It was a synchronized, dry, collective cough, a rhythmic clearing of throats that sounded precisely like a staged, deliberate mockery. It was the sound of indifference amplified, a profound lack of respect that cut deeper than any snarl or growl. Aaron felt the icy, crushing weight of their treason. It was not emotional betrayal. It was cold, pragmatic, and entirely decided. They had simply voted, and he had lost. The firelight played across their eyes, reflecting back not loyalty, but calculation. He turned slowly, absorbing the silence and the chill. He knew the next move would not be political. It would be bloody. The air was now saturated with ozone, and he had nowhere left to run inside the camp. He was a foreign body, and the system was preparing to eject him. The knowledge settled heavy in his belly, forcing him to move with deliberate, stiff precision. The attempt to reassert order was born of desperation and strategic necessity. Aaron led them to the deep, ragged canyon a dozen miles north, a place where his voice, when amplified by the stone walls, traditionally carried immense psychological weight and authority. He chose a section of the canyon floor, marked by poor visibility and uneven terrain, hoping the complexity of the landscape would neutralize their numerical advantage and his own increased vulnerability. He roared, releasing the command frequencies, low, vibrating oscillations that historically paralyzed aggression and demanded instinctual deference. The sound tore through the canyon, echoing off the ancient rock faces, but they did not break rank. There was no ensuing chaos, no sign of panic. Instead, there was discipline of a terrifying precision. 3 of them moved simultaneously, breaking from the perimeter with perfectly synchronized bursts of speed, flanking maneuvers that were silent and economical. This was not a chaotic struggle for dominance. It was an execution protocol. One massive shadow streaked toward his throat, aiming for the swift, disabling bite. The other 2 drove low, targeting his rear legs, intending to strip him of all mobility and leave him flailing and helpless on the sharp, loose scree. Aaron avoided the deadly coordinated strike by a fraction of an inch, collapsing violently onto the jagged stones of the canyon floor. The impact drove the air from his lungs, and he tasted the sharp metallic tang of his own blood, mixing instantly with the grit and dust coating his tongue. A searing pain erupted along his flank where one attacker's claws raked through the thick hide. His only asset now was his intimate knowledge of their training, the very habits and predictable movements he had instilled in them. They expected resistance and a stand-up fight. Aaron gave them nothing of the sort. He exploited their momentary anticipation, using the weight of the nearest attacker as a momentary pivot point, sending the beast skidding on the loose gravel, opening a hairline fracture in their coordinated line. He did not fight back. He bolted. The retreat was panic-driven but fiercely controlled. He drove himself toward the nearest body of moving water, a narrow, icy creek fed by mountain runoff, knowing instinctively that breaking the scent trail was paramount. His back screamed with the agony of torn muscles and deep lacerations. He heard the hot, whistling breath of the pursuit close behind him, the heavy, rhythmic drumming of their paws on the rocks. That sound, which had always been the reassuring rhythm of his protection, now felt like the relentless hammering of his own sentence. He pushed his body past the limits of endurance, hitting the frigid water with a shock that stole his breath, but washed away the immediate, crucial blood scent. He plunged under the surface, holding his breath until his lungs felt like bursting balloons, struggling against the strong current for only a few hundred yards. When he surfaced, gasping, he found a place the pack would never think to look. An old, corroded concrete drainage pipe running beneath a disused interstate access road, mostly clogged with silt and refuse. He crawled inside, the rust-caked metal scraping against his wounded hide. Aaron waited. The light filtering in from the tiny opening was choked by dirt and cobwebs. Hours stretched into a suffocating, viscous eternity. The pipe was heavy with the stale, putrid odor of decay, stagnant water, and ancient rust. He lay there, trembling from cold and shock, listening to the muffled sounds of the pursuit eventually sweep past overhead, their desperate snuffling and frustrated snarls fading into the distance. In the choking darkness, pinned by the metallic, earthy weight of the pipe, Aaron finally understood the true nature of their malice. The pack had not merely intended to eliminate him to seize power. They wanted to stage a spectacle. They wanted to demonstrate to the entire hierarchy, down to the weakest pup, that the Alpha, the embodiment of strength and historical continuity, could be beaten, that the legend was nothing more than soft flesh and breakable bone. He was now an outcast, a lone wolf, whose formidable strength was useless outside the strict confines of the structure he had built. That structure had just crushed him. The cold seeped into his very bones, a profound chill that had nothing to do with the outside air temperature. He was no longer the leader of the pack. He was its most hunted enemy, carrying the knowledge that survival meant rejecting everything he had ever taught or believed in. He was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The immediate aftermath of the escape was an excruciating period of sensory overload. Every shifting shadow was instantly processed as a stalking beast. Every sound of a snapping twig or rustling leaf ignited a fresh surge of acid panic in Aaron's stomach. He moved like a creature of pure nerve, seeking refuge in the derelict places humanity had long ago discarded and forgotten. He sought out the remnants of failed industry, the blackened entrance to an abandoned coal mine half collapsed under tons of slate, the empty, burned-out shell of a 22-unit motel just off the old Route 22 access ramp, the silent graveyards of rusted, scavenged automobiles baking slowly in the sun in remote junkyards. These spaces, heavy with the dust of forgotten labor and decay, offered a temporary camouflage cloaked in human disinterest. Aaron swiftly evolved a brutal, necessary discipline for sleep. He allowed himself no more than 15 minutes of rest at a time, setting an internal alarm that yanked him back to consciousness at the slightest variation in air pressure, the faint scent of a passing animal, or the almost imperceptible movement of air across his skin. His body was a landscape of permanent throbbing pain, a constant reminder of the canyon attack and the gnawing demands of exhaustion. His diet became tasteless, functional, and acquired at extreme risk. Dry, scavenged carrion, abandoned by other, less cautious predators, often spoiled or tainted. His own physical odor became an unwelcome companion, a sharp, sour, and unnatural scent of chronic stress and fear, an insistent physiological testament to his constant vulnerability. He spent 2 nights huddled within the dilapidated structure of the broken motel, where the autumn wind whistled mournfully through the smashed window panes. The room smelled of mildew, stale cigarettes, and old disappointment. Here, amidst the debris, Aaron located forgotten relics, scraps of ancient newspapers and faded, brittle road maps of the region. He spread the maps out, smoothing the creases with his massive hand. His mind, driven by survival, began the mechanical, detached work of a strategist. He circled old logging trails, marked areas of dense, impenetrable scrub, and highlighted potential ambush points, overlaying the terrain with his intimate knowledge of the pack's established hunting protocols. The work was dry, numerical, and provided a necessary counterweight to the emotional chaos. It was an attempt to impose logic upon the swirling, murderous irrationality that now governed his life. Transportation was a critical vulnerability. He quickly cycled through a series of vehicles, battered, decommissioned work pickups with rotting beds, clanking vans abandoned after mechanical failure, anything disposable. He never washed them, never filled the gas tanks completely, and ensured they were covered in a film of dust and mud. Attachment, he understood, was now a fatal weakness. Each vehicle was a transient, fragile bubble of temporary safety, one he had to burst and vacate before the pack triangulated its position based on the lingering scent of exhaust, heated rubber, or the unique signature of his own body chemistry. Yet his greatest enemy in this period of desperate solitude was not the pack itself. It was the crushing, absolute silence. It was not the natural silence of the deep woods. That silence was full of the subtle ticks, murmurs, and breathing of the life around him. This was the utter disorienting absence of the familiar pack noise, the low frequency of collective breathing, the soft, competitive jostling for position, the subtle communications, and the shared sensory input. That constant hum had always been the foundation of his existence. Its absence was deafening. This absolute quiet screamed louder than any pursuit, signaling his profound reality. You are alone. You are weak. You are undone. He often stood for long periods, deep in the shadows of the rusted wrecks, feeling the cold metal against his fur, trying to recall the comforting warmth of the pack sleeping around him. He could not. That memory was tainted, now associated only with the insidious threat of the scraped rock and the guttural cough. The silence affirmed his new state of being, the powerful alpha, reduced to a trembling, scavenging ghost, surviving solely on 15-minute increments and the mechanical analysis of old maps. He knew he could not sustain this level of paranoia indefinitely. He had to pivot, stop running, and regain the initiative before the exhaustion claimed him entirely. Aaron shifted from fugitive to observer. He leveraged the skills he himself had refined over decades: absolute stealth, hours of motionless, focused vigilance, the ability to read the minute vibrations traveling through the soil. He began tracking the pack's movements, seeking their new central hub. It was located in a large, relatively open stand of second-growth timber, far closer to a well-used county road than Aaron would ever have permitted. The choice spoke volumes. It was not strategic. It was arrogant. They operated with a sense of entitlement and exposure that suggested they believed themselves untouchable. Aaron positioned himself 200 yards from the perimeter, hunkering down behind a dense, thorny thicket of wild rose and blackberry brambles. He remained there for 2 relentless days, enduring the prickling pain and the damp chill, allowing himself to become an inert part of the landscape. Finally, he began to capture fragments of their communication: the careless, confident timbre of their voices, the casual exchanges between the patrol leaders. More important than the words, however, were the emotions underlying them. The new alpha, a large, aggressive beast named Kell, was not issuing directives about conservation of resources or management of territory. He was speaking about the right to excess. The truth, when it finally coalesced, was brutal and sharp, like swallowing a shard of glass. The pack, especially the younger generation who had never faced the immediate threat of extermination, was weary of discipline. They viewed Aaron's careful, minimalist approach, his obsession with minimizing tracks and scent, not as wisdom, but as the cowardice of an old beast obsessed with a past danger that no longer existed. "We are the apex," Aaron heard, his ears pressed low to the damp earth. The words filtered through the thicket. Aaron, kept us in a cage made of yesterday's fear. The humans are soft now, distracted. They are too weak to fight back effectively. Kell's voice, rough and heavy with self-adulation, continued, "We must take what we want, not just what we need. We must enjoy the taking." This was not about hunger. It was about the exhilaration of unrestrained violence, the intoxicating delight in chaos. Aaron was not viewed as a threat to their physical power. He was a threat to their ideology of anarchy. He represented order limits and the tedious, necessary caution that prevented the world from seeing them as monsters. The realization struck Aaron with the force of a physical blow. For his entire life, he had labored to build a hierarchy based on logic, on long-term survival, and on minimizing their footprint in the world. Now, that logic was discarded as irrelevant, a relic of a weaker time. The pack wanted the simple, intoxicating thrill of the hunt, unbound by moral or practical restraint. Aaron was no longer fighting for his life alone. He was fighting for a concept, the fragile, necessary boundary that separated a pragmatic, intelligent apex predator from an insane, self-destructive killer. If they succeeded, they would not only eliminate him, they would destroy the only system that guaranteed their long-term survival, opening the door for human reprisal that would wipe them all from the earth. He watched the casual cruelty with which they dispatched a small scavenger that wandered too close to the perimeter, the gratuitous violence, the laughter that followed the panicked scramble of the dying creature. It confirmed everything. Kell was not a replacement alpha. He was a cancer, and the whole pack was infected with the belief that their strength granted them boundless entitlement. Lying there, enduring the cold and the constant prickle of the thorns, Aaron felt the final death of the alpha within him. That role required patience, diplomacy, and the constant effort to maintain unity. He was done with unity. The only thing left to him was the role of the exterminator. He lifted his head, tasting the metallic fear on his own breath, and knew that the only way to save the species was to destroy the infection. His strategy shifted entirely, focusing now on surgical removal, not reclamation. The internal transformation was complete and chillingly pragmatic. Aaron shed the heavy mantle of leadership, tossing aside the need for emotional restraint or group cohesion. He adopted a new persona, that of the solitary eliminator, an analyst focused solely on systemic disassembly. His movements became economical, focused entirely on the shortest, most efficient path to his goal. His gaze, once burdened by the demands of command, narrowed into a relentless focus on vulnerability. His first target was a large, aging wolf named Rourke, one of the veterans who had quickly sided with Kell. Rourke had always hunted the tributaries of the winding creek, a creature of stubborn habit and rising hubris. Aaron had trained Rourke, knew his favorite stalking paths, his specific gait, and, crucially, his tendency to mark his territory with a signature scent on certain granite boulders, a high mark designed to challenge competitors. The confrontation was swift, silent, and entirely without struggle. Aaron intercepted Rourke on a narrow, slick shelf above the rushing water. It was less a fight and more a clinical removal, executed with the clean, brutal precision of a practiced surgical strike. Rourke met his fate instantly, registering only a fleeting moment of surprise before his path ended. Aaron did not linger to gloat or to feed. He left no trace of his own presence, no scent, no disturbed earth, no hair caught on the brush. But he carefully, methodically, arranged the scene to leave a different kind of clue. He placed the body near a disputed boundary line that Rourke and another ambitious younger beast had often bickered over. He ensured the signs of struggle suggested an internal, violent disagreement over territory. He used their own greed and rising paranoia against them. The bodies began to appear with unnerving regularity, always in zones of contention, always suggesting sudden, internal conflicts rather than the work of an external threat. The pack began to eat itself alive. Aaron, watching from the high ground of an isolated rock outcrop, felt the toxic tension spreading through Kell's camp like dry rot. Kell's reactions became increasingly frantic. He spent hours patrolling the perimeter himself, snuffling obsessively for the scent of an outsider, but found only the evidence of his own crumbling authority. He began to suspect everyone, questioning the loyalty of his own lieutenants, interpreting their fearful whispers as signs of incipient treachery. Aaron watched as Kell lashed out, arbitrarily punishing 2 other wolves for perceived slights, further fracturing the already unstable collective. This was vengeance achieved not through brute force, but through a cold, superior grasp of predator psychology. With each creature eliminated, Aaron felt a profound physical change. His body grew lighter, honed by the constant stress and lack of true rest. His instincts sharpened to a painful degree, his senses absorbing every minute detail of the forest. The strange internal guilt he had initially felt had evaporated entirely, replaced by a bleak, resolute acceptance. He tasted only the bitter tang of necessity. He was merely doing the hard, dirty work required to purge a dangerous, rapidly spreading contagion. The irony was heavy and inescapable. To save the concept of the structured pack, he had to systematically destroy its current manifestation. He was the cure, and the cure was terrifyingly brutal. One afternoon, Aaron found a piece of Rourke's fur caught on a jagged tree stump. He picked it up, feeling the coarse texture against his thumb, and examined it under the watery sunlight. He felt no remorse for the beast he had taken down, only a sterile satisfaction that the circuit of chaos had been tightened 1 notch more. He dropped the fur and continued his patient, meticulous surveillance, waiting for the paranoia to reach its absolute zenith. He knew Kell's collapse was imminent, and he intended to be there when the dam finally broke. The elimination of Rourke and 2 other key lieutenants proved to be the decisive psychological blow. Kell, the self-appointed alpha, had lost the last vestiges of effective control. His commands became contradictory, his hunting decisions erratic and tinged with self-destructive recklessness. He had driven the pack into a state of perpetual, exhausting combat readiness, yet the enemy remained unseen, a ghost operating solely within their ranks. The air in the camp was now thick with suspicion, the wolves snapping at each other over trivial slights. Aaron decided the time for the surgical removal of subordinates was over. It was time for the final concluding stroke against the source of the infection. He chose the site with deliberate surgical intent. It was an abandoned, deep clay quarry, a place that had served the pack as their initial highly successful base decades earlier. The red clay walls were still faintly permeated with the collective scent of their early victories and unified purpose. It was a site of profound symbolic significance, a place that would force Kell to react personally and publicly. Aaron set the trap with deceptive simplicity. He used a fresh kill, a significant piece of venison, rich and bloody, and positioned it deep inside the quarry floor, carefully placed within a sensory dead zone. The location ensured that visibility was poor from the rim, but the lure was too perfect to ignore. He then generously doused the kill and the surrounding earth with his own powerful scent, a dominant, unmistakable signature, mixed heavily with the scent of his rage. It was not subtle strategy. It was a direct, personal, and utterly public challenge that Kell, in his current state of paranoid fury, could not possibly ignore without surrendering all credibility to the few remaining loyalists. The invitation was clear. Come and claim what you think is yours if you dare. The sun began its slow descent, dragging long, bloody streaks across the western sky. Aaron took his position high on the crest of a clay ridge overlooking the quarry floor, an elevation that gave him a clear view and a necessary psychological edge. The air was dry, and the fine red dust, disturbed by the slight evening breeze, coated his tongue with a gritty film. He heard Kell approaching. There was no attempt at stealth, only heavy, deliberate footsteps filled with demonstrative, burning fury. Kell was roaring quietly deep in his chest, a sound intended to shake the foundations of the earth. He came alone, exactly as Aaron had anticipated. Kell was too consumed by his own wounded pride and suspicion of his remaining allies to risk bringing witnesses. He needed to prove, absolutely and personally, that he was the rightful alpha. Aaron flattened himself against the ridgeline, allowing the dying light to carve him into the shadows. He watched Kell descend into the quarry, his massive, powerful form silhouetted momentarily against the last vestiges of the sun. Kell saw the bait, smelled the scent, and his roar shifted from challenge to a promise of extreme violence. Aaron waited, the silence in the quarry suddenly absolute, absorbing all sound. In the moments leading up to the inevitable collision, Aaron felt a profound disconnect. There was no surge of adrenaline, no heat of anticipated combat. There was only a cold, heavy weariness and an absolute clarity of purpose. He was waiting not for a glorious duel between two leaders, but for a necessary conclusion, the execution of a terminal error in the system. This was the final act of his unwanted, bitter duty, and he carried it out with the clinical detachment of a butcher. The air tasted of dust, blood, and finality. He inhaled deeply, preparing the last movements of the life he had once commanded. The confrontation lacked the primal, mystical roar of the pack battles Aaron remembered from the old lore. This was focused, low-pitched, guttural, the sounds of massive bodies impacting and tearing flesh kept mostly within the bowl of the quarry. The fine orange-red clay surrounding them was instantly kicked into the air, clouding the space like a poisonous particulate fog, stained a deep crimson by the last rays of the setting sun. Kell was pure, unrestrained aggression, a charging bulldozer of muscle and bone devoid of strategy or finesse. He relied entirely on his superior bulk and the intoxicating confidence of his rage. Aaron countered with experience. He did not attempt to block the thunderous force of Kell's attacks. He feinted, weaving and dodging, forcing his adversary to expend catastrophic amounts of energy in missed, violent lunges. Aaron's attacks were targeted and precise, aimed exclusively at Kell's known weaknesses: the old, badly set fracture in his left hind quarter, the chronically stiff joint in his right shoulder, injuries Aaron himself had tended years ago. It was a battle of knowledge versus raw power, and the knowledge was winning. At one point, Kell lunged with spectacular ferocity, his momentum carrying him past the mark. His heavy body slammed into the clay wall of the quarry with a jarring impact that sent a shudder through the packed earth. The breath rushed out of him in a desperate wheeze. In that fleeting instant of stunning disorientation, the profound rage Aaron had suppressed for weeks, the fury over the betrayal, the exhaustion of the flight, the loneliness of the exile, finally broke free. It was a pure, animalistic hunger, but years of discipline kept the beast contained, focused, serving only the necessity of the kill. He used Kell's moment of pain to deliver the targeted final blow. It was over in less time than it takes a man to blink. Kell's massive weight hit the dust with a wet, heavy thud, releasing only a strangled, choked gasp. A sound of profound, confused surprise that echoed briefly in the sudden silence. Aaron stood over him, flanks heaving, lungs burning for air, feeling the hot, viscous blood running sticky down his foreleg. Around them, the dust settled slowly, coating the quarry in an orange pall, mixing with the deep, shadow-cut shapes of the stone and the pervasive smell of defeat. Aaron did not indulge in the victor's traditional celebration. He did not throw his head back to bellow the triumphant, challenging roar. He simply backed away a few paces, allowing his own body to shake uncontrollably as the adrenaline slowly ebbed. His own wounds began to pulse agonizingly, synchronizing with the slow, shallow respiratory gasps that marked Kell's final moments. The pack, those few who had remained nearby, drawn by the inevitability of the fight, watched from the rim of the quarry. They did not move. They waited for the victor to claim his prize, waiting to see who would lift their head and assume the absolute authority. But Aaron felt nothing but revulsion. The pack was no longer his. He had saved them from the external threat of their own stupidity, but he could not force them to accept the burden of discipline. He turned his back on Kell's twitching form, and the nervous, watchful shadows gathered above. He had won the war, but he had lost the reason for fighting it. He was done leading. He walked away from the center of the quarry, moving toward the shadows on the northern face, leaving the symbol of dominance, the warm, dying body of Kell, unattended and unclaimed. He allowed them to fight for the carcass and the ashes of their poisoned hierarchy. He had severed the bond entirely. The morning brought not the expected relief of triumph, but a crushing, oppressive emptiness. Aaron returned to the quarry floor hours later, his wounds stiff and screaming protest with every movement. The pack had scattered entirely. A contingent of the younger, less committed beasts had fled north, their fear of the violence outweighing their loyalty to any alpha. The remainder had simply melted away, driven by the instinct to survive the fallout of such a brutal, ideologically sterile reckoning. Aaron stood in the center of the clay basin, the sun now high and harsh, illuminating the dried, rust-colored patches of gore. He felt like the sole survivor at the epicenter of a silent, slow-motion catastrophe. He understood with agonizing clarity that his victory was profoundly Pyrrhic. He had not reformed the pack, he had liquidated it. He had successfully excised the infection, but in doing so he had created a vacuum of power. He knew that vacuum would be filled, not by the ordered stability he craved, but by dozens of new, smaller, utterly undisciplined threats. They would operate without the check of any alpha, hunting selfishly and carelessly, spreading the chaos far more widely than Kell ever managed in his short, self-destructive reign. This realization was a heavier burden than any physical pain he had endured. The role of the alpha, he saw now, was never about being the strongest. It was about carrying the impossible weight of the aftermath, the responsibility for what happens once you are gone or once you choose to step away. Aaron had failed to instill that sense of long-term stewardship, and now he was paying the price for the moral bankruptcy of his subordinates. He wandered to the edge of the quarry where the earth had been overturned years ago. Half buried in the clay, he found an old, sturdy hunting knife he had forgotten, a tool he had once used for careful marking and territorial demarcation. He pulled it from the earth, the cold, heavy metal familiar in his hand, a tangible piece of his previous life. He realized he had no intention of hunting the scattered remnants of the pack. They had been given exactly what they chose: freedom without consequence. He released them into the chaos they desired, hoping that sheer necessity and human reprisal would eventually teach them the terrible lessons he could not. He left the quarry, moving away from the mingled smells of blood, clay, and destroyed hierarchy. He no longer felt the instinctive need for concealment. His scent now was saturated not with fear or aggression, but with the cold, undeniable authority of absolute solitude. He was the end of a chain that had broken under its own weight. He moved westward, toward the deep, uninhabited stretches of the wilderness, passing the boundary stones he himself had marked generations ago. The sense of responsibility had shifted entirely. He no longer bore the responsibility of a leader, but the grim burden of a solitary regulator. He was the living ghost of the concept he had failed to preserve. The future was messy, punctuated by the rash mistakes of the lone wolves he had inadvertently created. His path was now defined by the necessity of watching the periphery, ensuring that their inevitable mistakes did not escalate into a full, species-wide confrontation with the human world. He was a creature of absolute power, yet forced into absolute restraint. The quiet desperation of his new existence was the only equilibrium left. The following months settled into a grueling pattern of perpetual motion. Aaron avoided major human population centers, and more importantly, steered clear of the forested zones where he knew the smaller, fractured groups of the former pack had regrouped. He became a wraith, a shadow existing solely to maintain distance and gather cold intelligence. He found a desolate, necessary existence on the periphery, a world of interstate underpasses, trash heaps behind silent factories, and the desolate margins of industrial parks where the smell of stale oil and chemicals masked all natural odors. His sustenance came from forgotten sources: nocturnal raids on remote commercial dumpsters, the cautious hunting of opportunistic wild creatures that thrived near the fringe of civilization. His presence in any given area was so fleeting, so expertly managed, that it registered less as a physical entity and more as a slight, barely perceptible alteration in the atmospheric pressure just before a storm. He perfected the art of minimal impact. He moved only during the deepest hours of the night, navigated by the weak glow of scattered high-pressure sodium lamps, and slept in places that smelled of concrete, rust, and neglect, places no animal, human, or beast willingly lingered. His internal dialogue had simplified, no longer consumed by the politics of the pack, but focused intensely on the calculus of balance. He knew fundamentally that he was a predator, an engine of necessary violence. Yet the past year had hammered home the terrifying truth: an uncontrolled predator inevitably devours both its ecosystem and itself. He had no further desire to govern the world. His solitary mission was now to manage his influence upon it. One chilly evening in late autumn, Aaron found himself on the high, rocky bluff, overlooking a small, slumbering town nestled deep in the valley below. The streetlights twinkled, warm and falsely comforting, marking the neat, ordered grid of human existence. The faint smell of wood smoke and frying food drifted up the slope. Aaron felt no pull toward that warmth, and equally, no urgent desire to protect the inhabitants. They were a reality, a force of nature as inevitable as the changing seasons. The key was simply maintaining the separation, the ecological distance. He stood there, a massive, silent figure silhouetted against the weak moonlight, his coat thick and heavy against the sharp, descending cold. He was studying the map, not of the territory, but of the boundary itself. He was observing where the control broke down, where the human world pressed too hard against the wild, or where the remaining disorganized elements of his former pack pushed their luck. Aaron Walker was no hero in this new story. He was not a savior intending to restore a golden age. He was a shadow, a solitary, pragmatic regulator, committed to the bitter, lonely work of maintaining an unsustainable equilibrium. He took one last, long breath of the crisp air, tasting the complex scent of the wild mixed with the exhaust fumes from the highway, and turned, dissolving back into the thick density of the trees. He would not seek a new pack. He had chosen the third state, to watch the line separating the ordered world from the consuming chaos, and to interfere swiftly and brutally only when that fragile border threatened to ignite. He became the living warning about the true cost of anarchy, a warning that only he, walking perpetually in the shadows, would ever fully comprehend or enforce.